George Knight's Colin Salmon. Life has changed exponentially in EastEnders recently, with the birth of a brand new baby girl. Much of last year saw George in deeply turbulent waters, beginning when he discovered that his ex-wife Cindy Beale, Michelle Collins, was embroiled in an affair with his son, Junior Knight, Micah Balfour. He later endured the breakdown of his marriage to Elaine Peacock, Harriet Thorpe, before becoming utterly panicked over his brother, Kojo Asare Deo Koleosho, who was cuckooed as part of Ravi Gulati, Aaron Thiara, and Tobias Okiokir's, Ayan Ibikunal Shadaru drug enterprise. Kojo had his flat infiltrated, taken over and used as a base by the nefarious gang to conduct their illicit activities from. When Kojo did finally escape with the help of his best friend and fellow victim, Harry Mitchell Elijah Holloway, George stepped in to help his brother heal after the trauma he endured, while also showing up to help his former fling and Harry's mom, Nicola Mitchell, Laura Doddington. While their romantic relationship stalled prior to the discovery of the drug operation, George's fondness for Nicola never faltered, and when he learned that she was pregnant and when they decided to keep the baby, it seemed there was light at the end of the tunnel for them. In a cruel turn of events, as George celebrated the opening of his new restaurant, Knight's Fusion, Nicola went into premature labor and suffered an incredibly tumultuous birth. She was heartbroken when her flu symptoms meant she'd be unable to visit her daughter, yet George stepped in again as a tower of support. Nicola was rocked when George declared his love for her, and immediately shut down the idea that there could be a future between them, demanding that they focus on their baby instead. It took intervention from Harry to force her to face her true feelings, and she later told George that she reciprocated, leading them to formally reunite. Next week sees teething problems in their relationship, though when George and Nicola come home with baby Ivy. Faced with a welcome home party, Nicola is instantly overwhelmed and demands that everybody leave, leading George's daughter Gina Knight Francesca Henry to take a more tender approach to cool her down. The couple clash again when Nicola discovers a ton of missed calls on George's phone, railing at him for being so careless when the calls could be from the hospital regarding Ivy. When she discovers the true source of the calls is Eddie Knight, Christopher Fairbank, George's evil adoptive dad, she's stunned. Nicola decides to keep what she's learned to herself, though when George finds a parking ticket from the hospital, she's forced to reveal all to him, and he heads to the hospital to face off with the man who raised him. Viewers will remember what a cruel, vicious man Eddie is. He and his wife, Gloria Elizabeth Council, had adopted George through a grotesque baby farming plot, and George witnessed him beat a black man to death as a child, unknowing at the time that the victim was his biological dad. Eddie slithered into Walford with a scheme. He wanted to use George as a witness in his impending murder trial, though when George finally discovered the true extent of Eddie's evil, he testified against him, with Eddie sentenced to prison for the brutal slaying. Gina and Kojo deeply troubled to learn that George has gone to visit Eddie, and when he returns home conflicted, they implore him to deeply consider what he's doing. With his family's words ringing in his ears, he heads back to the hospital, but what does he have to say to Eddie? George Knight had always believed he'd buried the past deep enough that it would never claw its way back to him. In Walford, people reinvented themselves all the time, new names, new loyalties, new lies. George had done the same. Or at least that's what he told himself. Until the letter arrived. It was nothing special at first glance. Plain envelope, no return address. But the moment George saw his name written in that jagged, familiar handwriting, his chest tightened. His hands froze mid-motion, pint glass hovering above the bar. Elaine was talking, Linda was laughing somewhere behind him, but the world dulled into a distant hum. He knew that writing. He'd spent years trying to forget it. George? You all right? Elaine's voice cut through, sharp with concern. Yeah, just tired, he muttered, shoving the letter into his pocket like it might burn him if he held it too long. But the damage was already done. Later that night, long after the pub had emptied and the square had fallen into uneasy silence, George sat alone. The letter lay on the table in front of him, unopened like a loaded weapon. He stared at it for what felt like hours before finally tearing it open. Thought you got away, didn't you? Just one line. No signature. But he didn't need one. A chill ran through him, colder than anything he'd felt in years. Memories surged, dark alleys, whispered deals, a night that had gone too far. A night he had sworn never to speak of again. You can't be, he whispered, shaking his head. But deep down he knew. The next day George was a different man. Snappy. Distracted. Haunted. Elaine noticed first, her eyes narrowing as she watched him slam glasses onto the bar with unnecessary force. "Talk to me," she demanded. "There's nothing to talk about," he shot back too quickly. "Don't lie to me, George." But he couldn't tell her. If he did, everything would fall apart. The life he'd built, the family he'd fought for. It would all come crashing down. And then he saw him, standing across the square, watching. The man hadn't changed much. Same cold eyes. Same unsettling stillness. A ghost George had hoped was long buried, now standing in broad daylight like he owned the place. Their eyes locked. And in that moment George's world shattered. That evening, the man walked into the pub. No hesitation. No fear. "Miss me?" he said, voice low and venomous. George felt his pulse hammer in his ears. "What do you want?" A slow, knowing smile spread across the stranger's face. "What's mine?" Elaine stepped forward, confused. "George, who is this?" George couldn't answer. Because the truth was worse than anything she could imagine. The man leaned in closer. His voice barely a whisper now. "You owe me. And if you don't pay, everyone here finds out what you really did." George's breath caught. The past wasn't just back. It was ready to destroy everything. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to EastEnders Spoilers Official.